All right, so let's talk about fractional exponents. So if you could turn to page 4 of your packet, you're just going to follow along and make sure that you take whatever notes, we do in this video. All right, so if you look at the top of the page, there's really two boxes. I'm just going to take a look at the first one. They both really say the same thing. But here it says, if we have a base, like we do right here, being raised to a fractional exponent, then what we could do is we could rewrite that as a radical. Now, when you look at the exponent, the numerator of the exponent gives us the power that we're going to put on our radical. So this numerator of a is going to give us our power right here. And the denominator of an n is going to give us our root. Okay, so we can take x to the a over n power and rewrite that as the nth root, see we put that where the root is, of the base of x to the numerator to the a power. All right, let's take a look at an actual example with numbers rather than just all variables, and it might just look a little easier. All right, so if we take a look at number 1, it says 16 raised to the 1/4 power. Now, we can, when something's raised to a fractional exponent, we could take that and rewrite it as a radical. So let's do that. Now, this number here, the denominator of our exponent, this 4, is going to give us our root. So we could rewrite this as the 4th root. Put a little 4 right there. And our base of 16 is what's going to go underneath the radical. And we're going to take that and raise it to the first power, right? This numerator right here of 1 gives us our power. So we'll raise that to the first power. Okay, so that's how you change from a fractional exponent into a radical. Now from here, let's simplify. All right, so let's figure it out. The 4th root of 16 is 2. And I want to take that 2 and raise it to the first power. And by the way, if you like to put parentheses around this, like that, you can totally do that. That's what the second box at the top of the page is saying. All right, and then 2 to the first power is just 2. So that's our answer for number 1. Okay, so let's do the same thing for number 2. So because we have a fractional exponent, what we can do is we can right away set up a radical. And we can take this base of negative 125 and put it underneath the radical. So since our fractional exponent here tells us power over root, we know we're going to have the cubed root of our base to the first power. Okay, so let's rewrite that as the cubed root, and we have our base of negative 125 in there already, and we're going to raise that to the first power. Okay, so the cubed root of negative 125 is negative 5, because a negative 5 times a negative 5 times a negative 5 gives us negative 125. Now, whenever you raise a negative to a power, you always have to put that negative number in parentheses. So we'll have negative 5 to the first power, and anything to the first power is just itself. So negative 5 to the first is just negative 5. Okay, now with number 3, what you'll notice is we have a negative exponent. So we know with negative exponents, the first thing we want to do is we want to make them positive. So I'm just going to make this into a fraction by putting it over 1. And in order to make an exponent positive, we move that term to the other side of the fraction bar. So since that 100 to the negative 1/2 is in the numerator, when we move it down to the other side of the fraction bar, we move it down to the denominator, it becomes 100 to the positive 1/2. Okay, and then we have to put a placeholder of a 1 up there in the numerator. All right, so now we could do, just going to write P over R. We know that stands for power over root. Okay, so now we're going to have 1 over, and let's set up our radical. Okay, our base is 100, so that's going to go under the radical. We know that the root is 2, so I'm going to put, when you have a square root, usually you don't put the 2 there. If you want to put the 2 there, you can, but normally with square root, we don't even put it there. And that's going to be to the first power. Okay, so we're going to have 1 over, well, the square root of 100 is just 10. And 10 to the first power is just 10, so that leaves us with 1/10. All right, so number 4, we have 64 to the 3/2 power. So again, we have a fractional exponent, so we could say power over root. All right, so we'll set up our radical. And we know underneath that radical, we're going to put our base of a 64. And again, we have the square root. This time I'm not even going to put the little 2 here, but we know that there's nothing here. We know that means it's the square root, and that's going to be, this time we're raising it to the 3rd power. Okay, so let's first do, and again, if you like parentheses here, you can put them, but they're totally not necessary. Okay, so the square root of 64 is 8, so we're going to have 8 to the 3rd power. So 8 to the 3rd power is just 512. Okay, so now flip to the next page. We're going to skip a few. We're going to jump to number 9. So if you take a look at number 9, we have a fraction being raised to a negative power that also has a fractional exponent. So the first thing we always want to do is we want to get rid of the negative exponent, or we want to get rid of a negative power. So we know if we have a fraction being flipped to a negative power, we can just take that fraction and flip it upside down, and when we do, that power becomes positive. So that leaves us with 16/9 to the positive 1/2 power. Now, keep in mind we know that with our fractional exponent, it goes power over root. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to, I'm going to make the numerator one separate radical and the denominator one separate radical.
No kids can play on that board.
That was my daughter Peyton. She's listening to me make this video. Okay, so anyway, back to this. Since the 2 is in the denominator of our exponent, that's going to give us our root. So we're going to have, for each of these radicals, we're going to have the square root. Now again, I don't usually put a little 2 there. So if there's nothing there, we know it means the square root. And this numerator is going to give us our power, so we could take each of these and raise it to the 1st power. And we're going to use the base of 16 in the numerator of our fraction here, and this base of 9 down here in the denominator. Okay, so really what we have is the square root of 16, which is 4, raised to the 1st power. So that's just 4. And then in the denominator, we have the square root of 9, which is 3, raised to the 1st power, which is 3. So that leaves us with 4/3. Okay, and then the last one we're going to take a look at is number 11. This one's multiple choice on your paper, so we'll kind of figure out what choice it is after we do it. So since this is power over root, we know we can set up a radical. And since this entire thing right here is being raised to the 2 over d power, we can put that entire thing, the entire 3b, under the radical. And then we're going to have the d root, and that's being raised to the 2nd power. So if you guys look, that matches up with letter D. The only difference is they just put parentheses around here, which again, if you want to put them, you can. And if you don't want to, you don't have to. So that's letter D. Now, I just want to point out one other thing. Let's just say that our question had said 3b to the 2 over d. Okay, let's say that there was no parentheses in our original question. Well, what that would mean is that it's only the b that's being raised to the 2 over d power. So really, it's almost as if there's parentheses just right here around the b. Now, what we would do if that was a question is we would just bring the 3 over. It's like 3 to the 1st power. And then we'd set up our radical. And the only thing that would go into the radical would be the b. And we would still have the d root, and that being raised to the 2nd power. So if this was the question, that would be our answer.